with dementia, my experience with dementia started really with my own father who lived in Jamaica. And I had the very challenging experience of having to be a caregiver. My mother was taking care of him in Jamaica, but I was here in Canada and really had to make sure that things were being managed in Jamaica. I saw the devastating effects that it had on my father, who, by the way, was a model patient. He was not violent or he didn't stray. He was very, very cooperative patient. And but he still needed 24/7 care. As you may have heard from the introduction, and thank you, Peter, for the introduction, I worked for many years in the corporate sector, particularly in the insurance sector, and I saw the effects of caregiver burnout on people who were taking care of their own families as well as parents, many of whom were living with dementia. So just to say to you that, yes, we are concerned about our parents and aging relatives and about ourselves who are getting older, but there are also other people, younger families that become caregivers, and there's also the spin-off effect on the economy, because there are people taking time off from work, people being burnt out, people going off on disability because of the tremendous pressure that they have taking care of relatives. My presentation today will focus primarily on my experience here in Canada. By extension, the statistics, the trends that I'm talking about here can be extended to anywhere in the world. I know that in the United States, there's the Alzheimer, there's an Alzheimer Association, National Alzheimer Association. In the Caribbean, we do have groups in Jamaica, I believe, that are looking at Alzheimer's, but it is still a topic that is stigmatized. People do not like talking about it. And I'm here to, try to help us demystify Alzheimer's. Peter, do I have control of the screen? Yes? I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
We are seeing your slides.
Okay. And when I click, does it, let me just see.
Yeah.
No, I don't have control of the screen.
David, can you check that out? Does she?
You do have control because we're seeing your slides. So you just need to advance your presentation.
Okay. See, the thing is, I'm not able to advance the presentation. Peter, you put the slide, here we are. Oh, okay,
David,
fine.
Yeah, David is handling it, yeah.
Okay, David, I'll just ask you to just press the next when I need to go to the next slide, okay? Thank you, David. Okay, so first of all, what is dementia? Dementia is a generic term that is used to describe a set of symptoms and signs associated with a progressive deterioration of cognitive functions that affects daily lives. Yes, it affects mainly older adults, but it's not a part of normal aging. What I wanted to say is that there are different types of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia, but dementia refers to any kind of change in the brain that disrupts a person's daily activities, normal daily functioning. Okay, next slide, please. So what types of dementia do we hear about? We have Alzheimer's, which is the most common form of dementia. It is believed, and I say believed because there are different hypotheses now emerging, that Alzheimer's is caused by the excessive buildup of proteins in the brain and amyloid proteins in the brain. Amyloid proteins are normally in the brain, but persons presenting Alzheimer's have an excessive amount of amyloid proteins. And also there are tangles of the neurons are tangled, so the messages between the neurons in the brain do not communicate very well. recent research shows that there are persons with the same amount of amyloid proteins as persons with dementia, but don't have dementia. So we're looking at other possible causes of dementia or other possible causes of Alzheimer's. There's also vascular dementia, which could be temporary. A person has a stroke, the circulation of blood to the person's brain is affected, so therefore they're not able to function normally. There's Lewy body, which is a buildup of Lewy body cells in the brain, and frontotemporal dementia. I'm not a medical expert. I'm just telling you that the causes of dementia are described by these different diseases, which are different types of dementia. There's also mixed dementia, where you can have a person having dementia for more than one cause. Person may have Parkinson's disease, and on top of that may have some vascular dementia, and so they have dementia from these different sources. Okay, next slide. Sorry, please go back. Yes. So what are the early warning signs of dementia? And I'm going to spend a little time explaining this. All of us at some point have some memory slips. This is not what I'm talking about, and I'm not here to scare you about that. There's some routine tasks that we do so routinely that we kind of forget whether we've done them or not because we're doing them mindlessly. Don't worry about that. That's okay. We're talking about memory loss that affects day-to-day abilities. A person who keeps asking you the same question over and over because their short-term memory has been affected. Now, you may misplace your keys, okay? You forgot where you put them. Okay, when you find them, that's okay. The problem is when you don't know what you use your key for, okay? That's when it's problematic. There's a second sign, difficulty performing familiar tasks. A person who is accustomed to boiling eggs for breakfast forgets how to do that or is having difficulty doing that. That's a sign. Problems with language. My dear father, poor fellow, when he couldn't find the word to express, he would use some other kind of language, which I didn't understand, but it's okay. That was him. He was trying to explain. A person who calls a plant a tree, or who looks at an apple and calls it a grape, is having a problem. They're trying to find the right word. Person who's dropping off in the middle of a sentence and can't remember what the first thought was, there's a problem there. Disorientation in time and space and place. There are persons who they go to a familiar place and all of a sudden they don't really know where they are. Person who is accustomed to going, like my father, I'll keep using him as an example. He was accustomed to driving down the street and going to a very familiar location. When he got to the crossroads, he didn't know whether he could turn left or right. And this is a place that he has been driving he was driving for the past, I don't know, 50 years. Well, my father was a smart man. He just reversed, came back and put the keys on the table. He said he's not driving again. But disorientation in time and place is also a very important sign. A person doesn't know where they are. Impaired judgment. A person who's putting on a swimsuit and is going outside in the middle of winter, okay? Or is dressing inappropriately when it's clearly obvious that the weather is different or something like that. Impaired judgment. Problems with abstract thinking. Person having difficulty doing basic calculations or balancing their checkbook. Misplacing things. Okay, if a person puts their sunglasses in the refrigerator and thinks it's their drawer, that's a problem. Changes in mood and behavior. A person could be sitting with you and everything is fine, and then all of a sudden they have a temper tantrum or they, react in a way that's inappropriate. Changes in personality. Person who was maybe very optimistic and positive and very outgoing becomes withdrawn and negative. And the loss of initiative is a person who no longer wants to do a hobby or no longer wants to socialize in the way that they used to in the past. So those are some of the 10 warning signs, the early warning signs. And there's also the other issue of challenges understanding visual and spatial information. Person having difficulty walking down the stairs, not able to understand the space between. So when they're driving, they miscalculate the space between themselves and other cars. These are some of the warning signs. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, let's not be paranoid, but then at the same time, let's be alert. We all need to create to-do lists. We all need to organize information in order to stay on track. Don't worry excessively about that. As we get older, the brain tends to process things, or at least process new information in different ways than it did when you were much younger. So I'm just saying to you that we need to be alert, but we don't need to be paranoid. Okay? Next slide, please, David. Now, let's look at the landscape of dementia worldwide. I describe this as a tsunami that's coming because we currently have each year 9.9 million new cases of dementia. This information I got from Alzheimer's Disease International, which is the world body that looks at dementia worldwide. So if you're looking at it from that point of view, you have one new case every 3.2 seconds. And the annual global cost of dementia is now above $1 trillion US. We have in Canada over 500,000 Canadians living with dementia, and we're looking at going to close to 1 million. I have 912,000, but that number has been revised upward. We're looking at in less than 10 years, 1 million persons, and that 500,000 was estimated in about 2014. So you're looking at the number of persons doubling. We spend over $12 billion by Canadians to care for persons with dementia, and that 12 billion does not include the unpaid care that's given by caregivers who are taking time off from work, using their out-of-pocket expenses. Okay, and this, we're looking at a tsunami. I just want to also point out, when you have COVID, you know that COVID is going to last 2 weeks, and then the person recovers or dies, unfortunately, and there's long COVID. But there's some amount of predictability with some of these other diseases. With dementia, and all forms of dementia, this can go on from anywhere between 4 years to 20 years or even more. So no matter what we're doing in terms of building new facilities for long-term care, hiring more people, we're in an unsustainable situation. All right, next slide, please, David. So what we need to look at is how do we bend the dementia growth curve? Next slide, please. These are just some stats here in Canada again. I said there's 10.4 billion is the annual cost to care for those living with dementia. There are 124,000 cases diagnosed in 2020. Women are more susceptible to the disease. Women live longer, yes, but we're seeing more women coming down with Alzheimer's at an earlier age. And one of the things that's very, very troubling is that when people bring up the topic of that they're not remembering, they're very often dismissed. Medical professionals are focusing primarily on physical symptoms and not asking people about their mental and cognitive health. And there's also the shame and the embarrassment when people are not remembering and they're being dismissed and ignored, and they're told that they're getting old. So these are some of the hurdles that persons who are concerned about their cognitive health they're facing. Next slide, please. I mentioned there's an unsustainable growth trajectory. Click. So the million-dollar question is, how do we bend the curve? Next slide. There are many institutions in Canada that are trying to bend the curve, in other words, to reduce the number of persons that are being diagnosed. There's all kinds of money. I saw a statistic where we had, and could you go to the next slide, please, David? Yes, we've spent over $236 million on dementia-related research over the last 10 years through the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. We have found out that there are genes that increase the risks of dementia, and they've identified the gene. The diagnosis now, we are having internationally recognized cognitive assessment tests here in Canada. Just to say to you that just one test doesn't give you the diagnosis, but you have to go through a series of tests over a period of time. The treatments have been found to slow the progression of the disease. There's this, the whole notion of brain plasticity. When I worked at the Alzheimer's Society of Montreal, we had a gentleman there who was an engineer all his life. He never picked up a paintbrush or a crayon ever in his working years. He came to us in the very early stages of dementia, and he was in our art therapy class, and he's now selling his paintings and exhibiting his paintings nationally and internationally. And for the past 14 years, there has been some deterioration, but not significant in the way other people. So what we're saying is that this particular person, maybe it's a one-off case, we don't know, but a part of his brain that was not really used before and that was fairly healthy when he was diagnosed with dementia is now being used, and it seems to compensate for his competencies in art and also slowing the progression of the disease. There's a lot of information out there about sharing practices about caregiving and supporting people with dementia and their caregivers. The only problem with this is that we're really addressing the problem after the diagnosis. So we're just treating more and more and more people, and we're not looking at prevention. Please, David. So with all of this, there's still no cure. And if we go to the next slide, there are some rays of hope. So the rest of my presentation is going to be very positive. Okay, so we've gotten past all of the, the really heavy stuff. Doesn't change the fact that we still have a problem with dementia, but there are rays of hope. So what we're seeing is that there's more research being done on prevention and protection therapies to address multiple causes of dementia. My own personal belief why we're not finding a cure is because we're testing the same hypothesis and trying to address the hypothesis of clearing amyloid proteins in the brain when there are probably other issues that or other conditions that contribute to dementia and to Alzheimer's that need to be really addressed in therapeutic research. There are quite a few medications which you may have heard of that are slowing the progression of the symptoms. We started off with Aricept, which I think works quite well, but then you also have another one, Aducanumab, which seems to be having more of an effect, but it's still not curing the disease, okay? There's a lot of research that has come out recently that is talking about prevention and early detection. We have found that there are some risk factors that are modifiable, meaning that they can be changed. And it has been estimated that around 40% of dementia cases may potentially be the result of 12 modifiable risk factors. when we talk about a risk factor, it means it predisposes somebody to a disease. It doesn't say that it means that the person is going to get the disease or not. And when we say that those risk factors can be modified, it doesn't mean that it removes the possibility that the person will get the disease. We're just saying that if people pay more attention to some of these modifiable risk factors, they could potentially slow the progression of the path to a diagnosis, or they could also reduce the symptoms potentially. Researchers have found that in 40% of some of the cases of dementia that they have examined, they're seeing that if those factors were addressed by those persons, they potentially would have had a better quality of life and would have not suffered from the more devastating effects of dementia. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about trying to bend the curve, I work for an organization called Hope for Dementia. After I tried to retire from the Alzheimer's Society of Montreal, there was a gentleman who he set up a charity, and he said everybody is trying to trying to address dementia after the fact, but he wants his organization to change the conversation and start talking about prevention and bending the curve. So he asked me to join. So I worked there for, I've been working there the past 2.5 years. And we worked on some research and factual information. And I just wanted to present the ways in which we're addressing dementia and dementia prevention. So the answers about bending the curve or reducing the number of persons being diagnosed or progressing with dementia are based on facts that we gain some insights. May I have the next slide, please? So first of all, what are the facts? Click. Okay, so there's a decline in anti-amyloid drug therapy research, as I mentioned before. Trends show that there's increased targeting of neuroprotection and new anti-neuroinflammation in phase 1 and phase 2 trials, respectively. So what they're doing is that they're looking at testing how we prevent dementia rather than just treating it. So the insight we gain from that, click, is we're moving towards prevention and protection therapy. So that's something that we need to start talking about and start promoting, and groups like the Rotary Club should be pressing, yes, for a cure, but also talking about prevention. Click. 56% of Canadians are concerned about being affected by Alzheimer's, but 3/4 of the people with dementia have not received the diagnosis. Okay, people are concerned. People who have the disease have not yet received a formal diagnosis. What is this telling us? That awareness, education, and prevention programs have not been effective in educating and changing behavior. We can sit around and talk about it. People who are living with the disease or who are at risk for the disease have no access to treatment, care, or organized support. Because, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at this after the fact. Next, please. So compared to all caregivers, almost twice as many caregivers of seniors with dementia exhibit symptoms of distress. So a person taking care of somebody who is just senior and maybe has diabetes and requires, special medication, that person could be distressing for them. But when you compare another caregiver who is taking care of somebody with dementia, the person who is taking care of a person with dementia has a higher risk of burnout and is more distressed than a person who is taking care of somebody who doesn't have dementia. So the insight from this is that families provide informal healthcare. The economy and healthcare system are adversely impacted simply because caregivers also need care. And I saw that with my own family. My mother felt that she could take care of my father. She was the only person who could take care of him. But what happened was when she ended up in the hospital and realized that it was the stress of taking care of my father that led to the deterioration in her health, that was when she realized that love is important, care from a loved one is important, but professional intervention is required. Now, imagine if my mother was not retired and she was still in the working world, she would have dropped out from work. The economy suffers because then you have persons, they're paying disability, to keep her income going. And the workplace and the economy suffer because the person is not there. The healthcare system has an additional strain on it. So we have to take care of the caregivers, and we also have to make sure that we're looking at not trying to treat the problem so much only after the person is diagnosed, but we need to look at prevention. May I have the next slide, please? So the possible courses of action is that we need to invest in promising research and clinical trials on symptom deceleration and reversal. We need to change the public's attitude of, well, there's no need, no heed, the person is just being forgetful, forget it, they're getting old. We need to change that mentality, and we need to advocate a national policy on screening in every single country. Here in Canada, as a woman, I am over the age of 50. Every 2 years, I get a reminder from the government that I need to go and get a mammogram to screen for breast cancer. If we know that there's a tsunami of dementia coming and that we have an unsustainable growth trajectory, the number of persons being diagnosed, we should make it mandatory in every country that persons get a reminder or they have access to some form of check their cognitive health. The other thing too is that we need to have services that target at-risk groups, persons with diabetes, hypertension, persons with Parkinson's disease, persons who are aging are more likely to have dementia. We need to target those groups and make sure that they're getting the care. And we also need formal support for intergenerational care because we have young persons taking care, as I mentioned, of seniors. Next slide, please. So what are the 12 dementia risk factors you can alter? What are the things that we can do to change? And you can see from my presentation that I have been speaking about, yes, taking care of a person when they have been diagnosed, but I'm looking more now at prevention and being proactive. What can we do to reduce the chances or reduce the impact of dementia? First of all, physical inactivity. Being a couch potato is, it puts you at a higher risk as you get older. Exercise contributes to the prevention of dementia as it improves your heart health, blood circulation, and keeps your mind and body going at the same time. Excessive alcohol consumption is also another risk factor that can be modified. Smoking, okay? These are things that adversely affect your health physically and cognitively. A person who is an alcoholic is more prone to fall down or to harm themselves and to have brain injuries. So, and the person who smokes has respiratory issues, so the oxygen supply to the brain is compromised. Social isolation, this is a big, huge issue. And we saw that persons during COVID, because they were not able to socialize, seniors in particular saw a further decline in their cognitive health and abilities. So it's important that seniors have access to activities and are constantly in touch with each other. Your level of education, it has been said that persons with a higher level of education are less likely. I'm not so sure I agree with that. What I'm sure of is if you're not constantly challenging your brain to learn new things, then you are more likely to have cognitive deterioration. Obesity obviously is another issue because if you're not eating properly and you're overweight, you're more likely to be physically inactive and you tend to be reticent about socializing with other persons. Air pollution is another issue that we have been saying is a contributing factor. There's a growing amount of research that shows that there's a connection between air pollution and dementia. So when traveling by car, avoid busy streets and busy times. Seniors also living in countries like Canada where you have indoor ventilation, make sure that your air conditioning and heating systems are clean and clear. The head injury. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't know. A person who has a head injury in their early life may not, or has a concussion, may not have any signs of dementia, but 30 or 40 years later, they come down with some form of dementia. We've seen this with hockey players here in Canada, many of whom, many years after hockey, they've retired, they've had dementia. So it's important to wear a helmet when engaging in any kind of active sports. And for seniors, make sure that your home is fall safe. You have rails in the bathroom, rails on your staircases that are properly maintained. And when you're using the stairs for extra exercise, hold on to the rails so you avoid falling. Hypertension and high blood pressure is another modifiable factor. The problem with hypertension and high blood pressure is that it's insidious. You don't really realize that your blood pressure is high. So it's important to have a diet that manages or maintains your blood pressure at a good level. So sodium, I believe, or salt is one of the main contributors to high blood pressure. And regularly check your blood pressure. Diabetes, need I say more? It also, persons with diabetes are predisposed to dementia. Depression, your mental health is also predisposing you to dementia. And hearing impairment, that's something that I think we should be aware of. When you are not hearing, you're more likely to use less of your cognitive abilities, because when you're hearing, you're processing what is being said, you're thinking about what is being said, and then you're responding. So your brain is actively working when you are hearing well. Now, if you have a hearing impairment, you are compromising the activity within your brain. So these are some of all of the factors which, if you look at it, look at all 12 of them, what you can see is that you can group them in three main areas of prevention. One is proper nutrition. Another area is physical activity and socializing. And then the other area is, the other area is physical activity, and the other area is socializing, being involved with other people. Okay, next slide, please.
Camille, we're down to 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm almost done. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the organization I work for, just a little bit. We focus on prevention, deceleration, and symptom reversal. We are actively promoting education and regular screening. We have petitioned the government to make prevention of dementia a healthcare priority. I'm only showing you these things because I think these are areas that it's food for thought, that anybody who cares about this issue, you could use this type of approach to raise awareness of dementia prevention. We provide cognitive support and stimulation programs with young persons, and seniors and at-risk groups are involved in some of our cognitive stimulation programs. We teach seniors how to use applications to stay in touch with persons through their tablets. We also have, we give them things like logic puzzles. We're also teaching them new skills apart from the skills that they may already have. And then we're also investing in risk reversal research. Next slide, please, David. Okay, so the Rotary can play a role and integrate your efforts with local groups in Jamaica through formal partnerships, building awareness, wellness, and community projects. And I just think I'll end right here and leave it open for questions. Next, thank you. Yes. I stuck to the timeline, David, didn't I? Not hearing you.
Well.
I
Yes.
said, yes, you did. It was down to the wire, but you made it.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I'm available to hear any questions.
I
Yes,
have a
please.
question.
Yes,
The club
Marie.
is going to be working in Kingston with a school for the deaf. I realize that the deaf population is a small population. Is there any indication that if you're profoundly hard of hearing, that your risk for dementia is harder or higher, rather?
This is what the research is showing, but they're seeing it mainly in seniors who the deterioration in their cognitive ability seems to be aligned or correlated to a decline in hearing. Now, a person who is deaf and is constantly stimulated and is constantly and is using their brain, I think I can't say with any certainty that I have any research that proves anything, but I would say that the important thing is to keep that person engaged and involved as, you know, throughout their life. It's one thing to have people in a school, kids in a school, and you get them out there and they get jobs, but what happens to the person who is a senior and is losing their hearing? Those are the people that need to also get some support and help. Harriet?
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm in Antigua. I have a history of diabetes in my family. My mom died in December. My uncle died Wednesday gone. He had advanced stage dementia, he even forgot how to swallow.
Oh dear.
My question is, so you spoke about something that piqued my interest, cognitive stimulation.
Yes.
Could you share just a little bit more on that and if it's available online?
Okay, cognitive stimulation is any kind of activity that requires a person to use their brain or to work, you know, to think through a process. So what I found was some research that proves that a person who is learning some new skill that is cognitively demanding, so has a better chance of preserving their memory and potentially, you know, preserving their cognitive abilities. What we do at Hope for Dementia, my organization, is that we offer people different types of activities that, so if a person was knitting all their life, they can continue to knit, but maybe they might want to learn how to do something different. They might learn how to use a new application, create a blog. You know, this is what I think it's very important. You can do things that are as simple as crossword puzzles, Scrabble, but have a variety of activities that keeps the person's mind going, and be patient and allow the person the time to think through and to work on things. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We've got time for one more question.
This is Joan. First of all, I really you had a disclaimer earlier that you're not a medical person, but you have done a fantastic, phenomenal, the research data that you have. It is so right, so positive. So I really probably want to tap into you because this is such a good information. When you talk about the dementia also, it's a big issue, not just for the debilitation, but the safety, because the person is at more risk for fall, and that then will cause other complications like fracturing, and then it really push healthcare costs up. So you have really touched on a lot of topics, a lot of information. So you've done a phenomenal job. And I almost want to say Dr. Camille, but but you did. I have never heard anyone outside of the healthcare industry that could have given such valuable information and just such real lived experience. So that's what I want to thank you for.
Thank you very much. I much appreciate it. And I really want to, and thank you so much for the appreciation, David. And I just want to say, could you please you have access to this presentation, please, please, please spread the word. Let's start talking about reducing the modifiable risks of dementia. We're
Yeah.
not saying that it will
Stop it.
stop it. We're saying that we need to give this a chance, and let's encourage the investment in research, promising research that is showing that in the very early stages of dementia, there's some of the symptoms that can be reversed. There's a question mark around it, but if it's showing some sign of hope, let's press at more for more research in that area. It's a very serious problem that we have in the world today.
I just want to add
Thank you,
one
Camille.
thing.
Thank you. We need to move on.
Okay.
Camille, I want to thank you very much indeed for that presentation. I have a PhD in biochemistry and understood a lot of what you said, and even more behind the scenes. I think you too did a wonderful job. Thank you very much. We have a virtual certificate of appreciation, but I will email you a copy, which you can print out and do whatever with. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so